Welcome back, guys. Today I thought I will make a slightly different video. You probably know that one of my major hobbies is pro audio and just audio production in general. And many of my videos are pretty much about that. Now, my older videos are about audiophile stuff, and in some aspects, some people would call it audio foolery. So just experimenting with audio and different stuff, really. And I've been in this hobby for more than 20 years. Actually, probably in both of the hobbies. Now, audiophile stuff has been with me for a longer time, and it has a larger importance in my current state right now. What I wanted to touch upon today is about the difference between the two. So, audiophiles versus engineers. The biggest problem I see is that engineers, typically speaking, let's say they went to university, they learned about measurements, they learned about physics, electricity, how, things work. But the problem is they have a worldview for the most part that's unshakable, and they have a very closed mind for the most part. Now, I work with engineers as well. I love working with engineers for sure, but definitely when it comes to topics that are outside of the scope of what they teach in university in general, uh, it's extremely hard to discuss those topics with an open mind with them. And so that's one of the reasons why I think there are two major camps when it comes to, audiophile stuff. And I've been following this for a long time. There's just as much foolery in pro audio as it is in the consumer world. And that might sound strange, but that's reality, okay? So the marketing gimmicks and the BS in pro audio is probably just as big as in the consumer world, okay? And as a first sort of coffee talk episode, I wanted to touch upon power cables. So generally speaking, when it comes to pro audio, people generally know that you need a shielded cable. Because we know that even with microphone cables, you need proper shielding, and then you have EMI interference and what have you, and so you want to ensure that you have the least amount of noise induced in the signal cables next to power cables. You don't run parallel cables and that sort of jazz. But for some reason, still, there's a huge number of huge number of people in the pro audio world who believe that uh, just a generic cable is enough and cables don't make a difference. I mean, power cables. Now, as for myself, I've had my fair share of, testing with power cables in my system. And I can tell you that there is a difference. At least I hear a difference. And yeah, I mean, if you are interested, I'm sharing my screen. There's a channel called Alpha Audio. I really really like them because they have a pro background, but at the same time they are open minded and they are willing to test with proper gear. And they've spent a lot of time ensuring that they can show some of the cables, because like not all the companies agree to live tests. And so what they have done, and I'm not a huge fan of microphone and listening back to microphone recordings of speakers, but at least it gives you some idea about differences. So they have done a test, as you can see here in the Dutch audio event, I think, yeah, 2 years ago, a little bit more, with 4 different types of cables or brands of cables, rather. So you can check out this YouTube video. I will link it in the description if you're interested and you're not convinced that there is a difference. The why is a completely different story, okay? And that's where I believe that the general understanding is limited when even what they teach in university is limited. A lot of the stuff that you learn is based on hypothesis and stuff that we know from science. That's, if you dig very very deep, is just a hypothesis, and there's just way more stuff beyond that we just don't understand or don't know or cannot measure. And that's the other thing, like, generally speaking, these two camps argue that, okay, whatever, so in the pro audio world they say if you cannot measure it, it's not there. It's a little bit problematic, but generally speaking, I would agree with that. And then on the other hand, there are people who say, yeah, well, if you hear the difference, then there is a difference. And that's, it also has its flaws because, there's a psychological factor when it comes to listening. I know for a fact that it makes a difference. And I think the biggest difference when it comes to power cables is the gauge of the cable. That generally speaking makes a difference, and then if it's shielded or not. Now that's obvious because it could be polluting, um, and the magnetic field is different when you have a proper shielding. Now, why I'm showing Neotech is because they also use a different type of conductor material, and conductor material, it makes a difference which is measurable. And I think Neotech is, if I'm not mistaken, they are the only company, I think, based in Taiwan. I'm not sure. But I think they're, yeah, the parent company is based in Taiwan, and they are one of the biggest companies that source raw material to other companies like OEM companies. And they developed this UPOCC copper, which is generally ono continuous copper. So the crystal structure within the copper is very very different. I'm not sure if I can show it or not. Maybe let me just try to Google that, because they have like like these magnifications. You probably see here that the purity of the copper is different. And yeah, there are the gas impurities, the crystal size. The crystal size is very different as well. And yeah, just generally speaking, it's a better conductor material. Better conduction makes a difference. So I think that one of the biggest problems is when it comes to power cables and electricity, people generally tend to think about them like water pipes, because that's the way they are explained in many websites as well, as if the electrons are flowing from one direction to the other, which is not true. Um, we know it's not true, but still, that's the easiest way to understand how electricity works. Um, so the way we have to think about it is you connect two ends of a power cable, one in the wall, let's say, or the power distribution unit, and then the other end to your gear, right? And that's a circuit, right? So the same way within a circuit, if you change something, if you change, let's say, the copper layer on a printed circuit board, that will be different, right? You can measure the difference. And it's not just in one direction, right? The whole circuit will be working differently. The same applies here. So yes, you have noise, and then there's some sort of filtering due to the geometry, and that's why I'm showing it here. Due to the geometry of the power cable, there can be some filtering going on. And the gauge really matters, and the whole circuit after the cable will behave differently when it has a different power cable behind it, okay? Um, that's very simplistic explanation, but okay. Um, so there's Dave Pensato, and I'm not switching topics. I just want to talk a little bit about pro audio world. Dave Pensato is, let me just be precise with this. So on Wikipedia, it says he's a Grammy Award-winning mix engineer. So his career began in Atlanta in 1970s. I think he was working with Mariah Carey and a lot of very famous musicians. Yeah, you see the discography here. So he's a mixing engineer, and he's very well known in the industry. And generally speaking, I really like him because he is open minded, and he had his show called Into the Lair, which I started following early on. And I remember that episode, and I found it where a company visited Dave in his studio, and then they said, "Look, we have better power cables that you could use in your studio." And as I mentioned, in the pro audio world, generally speaking, people just don't care about power cables, right? It doesn't make a difference. You just, yeah, you know, you want to ensure that you have maybe Mogami or Cardas or whatever, just proper cable for the microphones and proper shielding. But when it comes to, power conditioners even is generally just four mounts, which I have here in my rack, and then just generic cables, and that's fine. But then, okay, this company went to Dave and said, "Look, we have these power cables. Let's just switch all of your power cables to ours." And those were like heavy gauge shielded power cables. And he was shocked. And I think I found it here. There you go. So it was Into the Lair, episode 145. And so you see the comments here. It was interesting. I clearly remember the comments section where people were like, "This is crazy. He's out of his mind. He was paid a lot of money to say that his system sounds so much better and more transparent and open and everything." And even here, on this forum, the first mention is that I can't tell if he's genuinely excited about this product or just got paid to do this little advertisement. And then someone says, "Yeah, I can believe cables have an effect on sound. Which one specifically, by how much, where, and why? No one seems to know." And then he mentions Gotham and Mogami. And then someone says, "From a circuit point of view, audio cables can be seen as filters as they're not purely resistive. So depending on how it's built, it could affect the signal passing, blah, blah, blah." And then, I don't know, like someone said here, "I did all sorts of tests 20 odd years ago. Everyone in the room easily heard the differences." Well, yeah, I mean, uh, you can do your own tests if you have a proper system. And it doesn't need to be like extremely expensive system, but proper speakers and everything. Because for the most part, I think AC cables make a difference in the sound cues, in where you hear decay, for instance. And if your room doesn't and your system doesn't convey decays properly, then you will not really hear those kind of differences. So I would say, in terms of percentages, I think it's about like 5, maximum 10% difference. It's not like night and day difference, but there's definitely a difference, which is obvious if you make these changes. So yeah, someone says, "I personally would never use the word dramatically or shocking." True. Um, just like I wouldn't use the word to describe different converters. So I saw someone mentioning that he could clearly hear a difference. He was a pro audio guy, which was similar to changing converters or DACs when it comes to power cables. So that's very interesting. So yeah, what I wanted to show here, because I remember when I saw that episode that I would say 8 out of 10 comments were extremely negative and against Dave and how he could just do it. How if he's stupid or he's just paid to say these things. And that shows exactly how close-minded some people are. So I just wanted to say, because I know that my audience, which is not a huge audience on YouTube, is split. So some of my audience some of you guys are in pro audio, or you have a home studio, and some of you guys are interested in audiophile stuff or just audio in general. And for both of you, I wanted to say that you need to be open-minded. So audiophiles, generally speaking, need to look more into science, because there's just a lot of gimmick, and a lot of companies take advantage of audiophiles who just buy anything because it's expensive. It should be better, which is not true. So you need to look more into science. But then on the other hand, some of the guys who only look into science, they need to be a little bit more open-minded and understand that there are different types of measurements than you're used to. And if you have a relatively good system with proper resolution, and you change all of your cables, then you should be able to hear a difference. It's not a big deal. So that's about power cables. And I might make other videos, because right now I'm making a few power cables as well, like do yourself power cables. But that's just one of those topics that I got asked in the past, what I think about power cables, and I think they do make a difference. But on the other hand, I'm a little bit skeptic about, going above a certain price range, and some materials that are said to be, overly good. I don't know. I'm a little bit skeptical about those, but shielding, gauge, and proper conductors, I think, and I believe they make a difference. So I hope that was helpful for you, or at least it made you think. If you want to argue or ask a question, please put it in the comments. I'm happy to start a conversation, and see you in the next one.